I'm joined today by fellow author Vee Walker. She's also an editor. And Vee lives between the Highlands of Scotland and the south of France, which sounds very nice. And she's speaking to us today from the south of France, although she tells me the weather's not brilliant. We're recording this at the end of January, and the weather in the north of Scotland is horrible. But there we go. Vee's going to be talking about this book, The Glen Nevis Rose, written by Ewen Cameron and co-authored by Vee. So, Vee, first of all, tell us what the book is. The subtitle is Lady Mary Cameron of Glen Nevis and the Road She Took to the New World. So, who was Lady Mary Cameron to begin with?
Well, the canny-eyed amongst your listeners will have seen that the author's name, Ewen Cameron, matches Lady Mary Cameron. Um, Distant relatives, I believe, but not, Ewen is not a direct descendant. The common denominator is that Ewen Cameron lives in the house in Glen Nevis that Lady Mary Cameron lived in hundreds of years ago. And she was a remarkable woman. Ewan stumbled across her story and was struck by the fact that no one knew it locally. And it really is a story that should be better known in the Scottish Highlands and in the diaspora beyond, about this family this plucky family that uprooted themselves, boarded a ship in the Highlands, as so many did, and took off for a new life in the New World in the difficult decades which followed the Battle of Culloden.
So they weren't actually cleared. They were among that group who decided that life would be better across the Atlantic.
The Camerons were a wealthy lot. They were gentry and had money, and I think they were young enough still to decide that they were a bit sick of the atmosphere in the Highlands. It must still have been very oppressive, I think, to be a formerly Jacobite supporting family in the aftermath of the battle. There were still echoes of what happened in the aftermath of Culloden echoing down the glens. And I believe that they just decided there would be better opportunities on the other side of the Atlantic. Yes, yes.
Where does the rose come into it?
Mhm. Well, Lady Mary's mother was Mary too. And Mary had a physic garden, we believe. Physic gardens were quite common in those days. The gentry ladies would plant them with roses, but not necessarily roses that were simply there for beauty and to smell the fragrance of them. They would have been there as some sort of physic, a medicine. So these medicinal gardens, which could often be very beautiful too, were quite a feature of that period of history. And this rose was symbolic, I think, to the second Lady Mary, the one that crossed the Atlantic. And she dug a rose bush up and put it in a pot and takes it off to America with her.
So the story, Ewan had found the story, and how did he and you come together? Did you know each other before?
No, I had got to know Fiona McBain, who's another fellow author, and she is Ewan's daughter. And Fiona got in touch and said, my father's got this scheme to write a book, but he might need a bit of support, and could you have a word? It was as basic as that. And so I got in touch with Ewan, loved the sound of the story, thought, gosh, this sounds good. And the first thing, my reaction was, this could be a novel. This could be, an epic novel. But that wasn't what Ewan wanted to write. He wanted to write something that was more factual, but which had little flashes of insight through fiction. So we've ended up with a very unusual book, which is half fact and half fiction.
How did you come to decide to do that? Did the two of you discuss it and think this would be a good way to do it? Or was it to fill in gaps that you knew research wasn't going to find for you?
I think I wanted to get across how it felt, Maggie. And that, nonfiction doesn't always do that. You can deliver the nitty-gritty, the raw facts, but you can't always get across what it felt like to be kneeling in your mother's garden digging up a rose because you know you will probably never see this soil again. And I wanted to communicate that. And the fiction itself is very true to fact, but it's still fiction. But I think it adds something. And certainly the readers who have commented on it thus far seem to have liked the mixture. But no, Ewan and I treated this as a two-hander. We were batting ideas to and fro. Goodness knows how many versions of the manuscript we ended up with, an awful lot before we put it through for publication. But it's been a joy, it really has.
Would you like to read us a wee bit? And what would you
Willingly.
select to read?
Well, let's see. Let's have a little bit of Lady Mary Cameron actually digging up the rose. I think it's as good a place as any to start. So the date is September 1773. Lady Mary and her large brood of children, which she adds to once she gets to America, they're preparing for their journey, which will see them leave forever. We really can't imagine what that was like. We have WhatsApp, we have video calls, we have aeroplanes flying to and from our countries, and it's so easy to travel these days. Then you more or less accepted you might never return. A few did, but not many did. So here we go. Lady Mary Cameron is on her knees in her late mother's physic garden, trowel in hand. From the upper floors of the stone house behind her, she can hear her children calling, but this time, intent on her task, Mary fails to respond. Today, her childhood home sits reproachfully amid the giddy turmoil of their departure, as her own household mingles with that of her brother Ewen. Tomorrow, she knows it will have fallen rather more silent. It has been an unusually cold autumn. The first dark rose leaves are beginning to break away from the stem and fall, soon to crumble into the rich soil in which, until today, this rose bush has flourished. Here and there, a pale and desiccated bud clings to a stem, but almost all its energy has already reverted to its roots for the winter. All the better. Her mother, also Mary, who came from Dungallen by Oban, gave her daughter both her own name and the tending of her roses. This one was her favourite. Well, soon it will reawaken in a new world, just as they all will, her daughter hopes. There we go. Just a wee snippet.
Yeah, that's very nice. My immediate reaction is the rose would have needed water crossing the Atlantic, presumably in its pot. They couldn't use seawater because that's salty, I presume. So she would have had to beg for some water from the supplies
That's right.
to be able to keep the rose alive. And this rose went on to live, and there are more roses of this variety. Yes,
It's remarkable. Yes, they planted the rose initially in New York State, where they invested all their fortune, all the money that they had brought with them, in buying land. Um, and literally put down roots, but it didn't last long. Before too long, they found themselves embroiled on the wrong side of the American Wars of Independence, and eventually they were harried out of the land that they had bought so dearly, and they moved to Canada. But at that point, the rose would have well and truly put down roots. They wouldn't have dug up the rose bush again. They would have taken cuttings. And I could imagine in my mind's eye Lady Mary, who was a doughty character. We know a lot about Lady Mary, saying, right, you shall have this one and you shall have that one, and make sure they stay damp and make sure you put them in the soil as soon as you get somewhere. And her daughters, and sons, indeed, they were marrying and settling in places of their own in Ontario, which is where they all ended up. And they literally put down the roots of the rose and planted the rose. And so the rose becomes this metaphor in the book for the family's settlement in the New World.
and are Lady Mary's descendants still in Ontario today?
Very much so. Yes, they are.
And what has been their reaction to the book?
Well, we've been astonished by the diaspora reaction, really. We chose to self-publish this book, and Ewan's office at Glen Nevis Holidays, he is busy sending out all these books worldwide, and he's signing most of the copies too. Um, and we've had them go to Australia, to Canada, to New Zealand, to America. It's remarkable where Scott settled. There are Camerons, and this book means a lot to people.
It's physically, it's a lovely book. It's a lovely production. I must commend
Thank
you
you.
and whoever produced it. And it's lavishly illustrated.
It
Um,
is.
and I wondered how you put all that together. Was that a headache? Um, a real nightmare to get all the lovely photographs?
Um, it wasn't easy. It became more and more illustrated as we wrote it. I mean, when I first talked to Ewan about it, he showed me a wonderful pamphlet that his father had published. And I think he had in mind something rather similar, which was basically a book of words. But this became really this needed photographs rather more than the story which his father had told. And without a picture of the rose, I don't think it would have leapt off the page as much. And we just kept finding more and more bits and pieces. And you mentioned the design. Well, Colin McConaughey, who incidentally is a former head of interpretation at the National Trust for Scotland, is the designer on this publication. And he's a wonderful guy, has the patience of a saint, which he needed on this project. And he too was busy sending me pictures saying, look, with this too, does this illustrate such and such? So we did find a lot of images that seemed appropriate. And the whole story of the Pearl emigration is not one that is known, but I think the pictures help communicate the story very well, I think.
And the actual rose itself, it's an exquisite cover. It's really beautiful. Very nice. I think I read somewhere that you're a gardener. Is that true?
Oh, yes, I love
So,
gardening.
did
Yes.
this help inform the book
I
or
think
inspire
so.
the book?
I mean, I know what is required to propagate roses. And I found I have a family recipe book which I've referred to in this one from roughly the same period, a little later, which gives a recipe for a rose lotion for the face. So roses were very often associated with having a beautiful complexion. And we know that there was one specific eye cure that was made from Rosa alba, and this is an alba rose, this particular rose. And so perhaps one of the children had, gummy eyes, eye problems, had poor vision. Who knows? Who knows? But they wanted to take this rose. And of course, it was considered a bit of a bank vault as well, a thorny rose, which is a lovely element to the story. People would
Have,
bury their
have,
treasures under the
oh, I
rose.
see what you mean. Yes.
Mm.
Ah, yes. So I noticed also just sort of seeing what you were doing on social media that you were selling a lot of the books through garden centres, and I thought it was an absolutely inspired piece of marketing.
Yes.
And did they sort of, when you first went, did they say what, or were they just very receptive?
Well, I have a wonderful relationship with Monroe's Nurseries in Malachy, which is one of our local garden centres on the Black Isle. Fantastically placed, great restaurant. And right by the restaurant, they have a little shelf of books, not many, just a few. And when I published my first book, Major Tom's War, I went in rather diffidently and I said, look, would you be interested in stocking this? And it was just before the 11th of November. And they often have a beautiful display of poppies, poppy ornaments for the garden and so on. So I said, could I come along now? And they said, of course you can. So it was only natural to go to them and show them the Glen Nevis Rose book. And they said, oh, yes, we'd love to have that. What is more, they're ordering in the wonderful rose itself. So
Well,
people
that
will
would be
be able to
great.
buy the rose there in
Yes.
Monroe's nurseries come the spring, I think she said. Um, So it's a wonderful thing that you can actually read the book and then plant the rose if you
Yes.
wish.
And do you think you can't avoid growing metaphors in this? Can you? The story's still growing, or the people who are finding out about the story are still growing around the world and locally?
That's a lovely idea. This growing metaphor, growing and planting and taking root too. It's that sort of feeling. I think it's a story that will help the diaspora, all those Scots descendants all around the globe relate to what it was like, the day their forebears left, the day their forebears clambered into, a large or a small ship and turned their backs on the Highlands and left it. I think it has its own magic. We're certainly getting messages from people who have read the book, who often ask for more copies. We've had a few people give multiple copies as Christmas presents, which was lovely. Um, but I think too, we've had people say, I have this rose. Now that's interesting. People in Canada saying, I am sure we have this rose in our garden, sending pictures of it. And it can't still be the rose, but it must be a descendant of it. And if you take a cutting from a rose, you can keep a rose going forever. You just keep taking cuttings, root cuttings, or whatever, and you can propagate them that way. So someone through time has ensured that this rose, the actual rose, has survived, and it has now come back to Scotland and is being propagated again in here in Scotland. So it's wonderful.
Wonderful. So the rose is eternal. Um, what do you think she would have thought if she could have seen this book?
I think if Lady Mary could have seen this book, she would probably have instantly castigated me for getting something wrong, because I'm conscious that I am not a true historian like you are. I have written it as historically accurately to the best of my abilities, but I'm sure Lady Mary would read it and go, "Oh, wasn't like that at all. How dare you?" I hope that's not the case, but who knows? We've done our best. I hope she would look at it fondly, because it's certainly a celebration of her remarkable family. And she herself must have been a tough woman. And to survive into their 90s, both John and Mary Cameron, Lady Mary, survive into their 90s at that period of history. They must have been cherished by their family. And they must have been loved for that to happen, I think. And tough old genes, tough old genes.
You think she comes across to you as a formidable woman?
She certainly was. And there's a wonderful anecdote that we discovered through WikiTree, which was a useful source of information. Unfortunately, not all of it's sourceable. So people post things on WikiTree. You can't always find who the poster was. But there was this one story that rang true. Her son became a spy. One of her sons became a spy, and worked for the loyalists, for the really the royalist cause, and unfortunately was captured by the enemy and was would have been shot, I think, by General George Washington and his troops. But Lady Mary finds out about this and rides full tilt, throws herself at the feet of George Washington, who I think basically knew a comely wench when he saw one and thought, oh, just get them out of my sight. And he made her promise that they would leave if he released her son into her charge. And so she got her son back, and they did. They did take off for Canada shortly after that. But she saved his life, I reckon. Amazing woman.
You can see that being dramatized, can't you?
Yes,
As you
yes,
described it, throwing herself
yes.
at Washington's feet. Have you any ambitions to write more about her?
Oh, it's tempting. It is tempting. She's there in my head. But I think that the Glen Nevis Rose is already a pretty good read. We tell her story pretty well.
Yeah.
But from here, the thought of a film based on what happened to the family, I think that could really work. I think it would be a wonderful thing. So if anyone fancies that, they should have a wee word with Ewan or myself, and we'll see what comes of it.
If somebody wants to buy the book, can they buy it or have they all sold it?
We are beginning to run low on stock, but I think there are some copies left, yes.
So, what's next for you as a writer? And you edit as well, I know. So, what's have you got another project in mind?
I am finalizing 5 years of work into a long historical saga called the Patiala Letters, which will be queried. Horrible word, queried. I don't like it at all, but
Like it?
it's what one has to do. So that will be going out to potential agents over the course of the next couple of months. It's a drama set in Canada, in England, in India, and in Afghanistan. And like Major Tom's War, it's rooted in archives and family genealogy. And a true story with a good few murders thrown in. People like murders, don't they, Maggie?
Well, yes, it's a variation on tartan noir, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
worldwide noir. So yes, that sounds good. Okay, well, thank you very much for talking to me. It's just I can't get over what a lovely book it is.
It does feel nice.
It's
It
just
does
such a
feel
nice
nice in
book.
your hand, doesn't it? She says, fondling her own copy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, very
Well, I
nice.
think, I can't praise Ewan highly enough for bringing this wonderful book to the world because it's like giving a story back, a forgotten story back to Clan Cameron. That's what he's done. But it's relevant to so many more Highland clans and to diaspora descendants all over the world. It's a
Yes.
wonderful read.
Uh,
Mm.
well, congratulations to him and congratulations to you and to the producers of the book.
Thank you so much for asking me along today.
You're welcome.